Hey there, this is going to be the first one of these videos I do, so hopefully someday we look back at this and laugh. I hope to get better at it, but I'm going to start out, and the first video I'm going to do is about actually building a better light to do videos, so it's sort of self-referential. But I'm going to get started by using an old, it's called a troffer. It's a lamp that normally hangs in a drop ceiling that I have. It's an LED panel, and there's a diffuse light, a nice bright light that's color corrected, so it should be a good light for illuminating faces when doing videos. I'm going to use that. I've got a small power cord hooked up to it. I have an old power cord here that was up on a roof for a bunch of years, and so the power cord is in pretty rough shape, so I'm going to cut it down and use a piece of that. I'll use a little conduit strain relief to hold that thing in there, the cabling in there, so that it doesn't pull out. And then when I opened up the box inside the ballast box inside the LED, I found that there's a dimmer capability in there. So there's 3 wires. One of them is ground, one of them is 10 volts, and one of them is the dimmer value. And if you range that dimmer value between 0 and 10 volts, you get dim light. And so I bought a little potentiometer, which I'll hook up to that. And that's pretty common for dimming lighting, like LED lighting or office lighting. So I'll have a little bit of control over the amount of light in it. And eventually I'll build a stand for it so it sits up sort of like on a tripod so that I can position that easily when I'm shooting video. This light's been useful. I've used it before in a basement office I had where I needed just some sort of daylight. So I put it up almost like a window and had it up during the day so that it didn't seem so dark in there. I've also used it when painting and or finishing a boat hull, and I was able to kind of put it at a really oblique angle to the boat hull and see imperfections really easily. It's common for people that do drywall or any kind of finish work to do that. So I'm going to get started here, and we'll start tearing apart the light and getting the powers hooked up. Okay, so I looked at the power cord, and it's in rough shape. It actually is in worse shape than I thought. It's missing a ground leg, and I was hoping to use the first 10 or 12 feet of it, which have a decent jacket on them. The rest of it's been bleached out by the sun and ruined, but I think this thing's just ready for the recycling because it has no ground leg. So I'll go ahead and stick with the one I had, which was from a power strip. It's got a ground leg, and then I can use an extension cord of varying length to hook it up when I need to. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just dismantle the existing wiring so that I can get it pushed through that strain relief and plugged in better. So you can see there's a panel here with holes in it that I would like to be able to use, but I don't want that thing poking up and back. But I can measure it to see how big a hole I need to make for my strain relief cables. Looks like 7/8 is going to be just fine for using this little strain relief that I'll plug in there. So I'm gonna put that hole out the bottom here and run wires off the bottom. So I'll take this cover of the ballast off, and then I can also run the wire for the potentiometer to do the dimming. So this is where you can see there's a ballast box that has power coming in on this side. It's got the wires going out to the LEDs on the underside of the light, and it's got these 3 wires, and they've got the signals set up here. So I'll use those and plug those into the potentiometer, solder in up onto the potentiometer up on top. So I'll probably cut a hole in the bottom here as a strain relief for the wiring, and then I'll cut a little small hole up in the top here for the potentiometer to mount. And I can put a knob on there, and then I'll have dimming control. So I'll go cut those holes and come right back. All right, so I'm going to use this little hole saw and for the bigger hole for the conduit that I'll put in this face. I do want to, because this thing is going to want to grab the metal, I'll cut a little pilot hole first, and then I'll go through really carefully with that. So I'll just use a small bit of any size to create a pilot hole first. And then we'll switch to the bigger bit. So that one walked around a whole bunch and made the hole a lot bigger than the actual drill bit. So I can go with a larger one of these. On this other side, I've got a drill bit that's the size that I need, and I will again drill a little pilot hole. The potentiometer has a little, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little leg that sits out outside the hole, and that keeps the potentiometer from spinning in the hole. So I'm going to put it in there, and then I'm just going to take another bit and cut myself a little tiny hole on the outside here to accommodate that. Needs to be just a tiny bit bigger. There, now when this sits through, that pin goes through that hole and it stops it from moving around. And then I'll screw it on and I'll cut this thing down eventually. Okay, so now this potentiometer it's got three little legs on it, and I'll put the ground on, or the 0 volts on one side, the 10 volts on the other, and then I'll put the dimming bit in the middle, and that way when you twist the knob it'll shift between 0 and 10 volts to give a signal for dimming. There's a little color-coded legend here tells me which one's which. So the yellow's the 10 volts. I'll put that on one end of the potentiometer. And then the purple wire is the signal wire. That's the one that's going to be offer the dimming value. So I'll put that in the middle. And then lastly, the 0 volts or ground wire will go on the last leg. All right, and then I'll probably just wire it up by hand here on the bench just to make sure it's working well before I put it all together. Looks good. I've got off and all the way back up. So that'll be nice to have. So now I can thread this through the right way and put it back together. Okay, so I threaded this thing through, and this is just really acting as a strain relief more than anything. So and I think that's backwards from what you'd normally put it through in a box, but because I want to not have anything on the outside to get in the way, it's probably nicer to have it backwards. All right, so there's the soldered up thing. I've got the washer on the back, and remember there's that little hole that is going to keep the potentiometer from spinning around. So I will drop it in here. Make sure that hole registers. But there's sort of a lock nut. And then the final nut. Okay, and then the last thing to do is to figure out how big our knob's going to be. I'll put this together. All right, and then I just got to figure out how long to cut down the shaft on the knob. Okay, here's my knob, and it's got a little set screw in it, and I just want to see, I'll open that all the way up and see how much. So it looks like I want to take off a little less, probably 5/8 of an inch from the end of this thing. All right, then I can test fit that. Looks pretty good. And go ahead and tighten up the set screw. Then I have dimming. Okay, so one thing I'm curious about is how much wattage this thing uses, just out of curiosity. So I've got this little watt meter, and it's showing 47 watts now, and I believe that's full brightness. So I'll try. I'm kind of curious when you turn it down if it changes the amount of current. And it does. It cuts it down, kind of corresponding to the amount of light that's coming out. And it clips off. It doesn't get down to zero brightness, but it is variable with the knob. So that'll be nice. Now I just got to work on a stand. Okay, so that's the first part of the video. I've got the light set up now, and I don't know what I'm going to take a look and see what this looks like when I edit the video with that light and filling in the diffuse facial stuff. So it's sometimes the little ring lights that people have make little rings in people's eyes or eyeglasses. Hopefully this is a little bit less so. It will be nice to have light where if I get in a dark spot and I want to do lighting, and that should help. A couple other quick impressions as I've started filming. Like I said, this is the first time I've done one of these videos, and it's a little awkward, so thanks for suffering through it. It's strange to have the sense of trying to think about what the camera's seeing as well as what I'm doing. I made several mistakes along the way, and I think it's important to incorporate those mistakes when you're doing projects, especially when you're trying to invent something or do something from scratch. That's part of the process, and kind of overcoming those challenges. I'm going to edit now, and I'll see how much of this I can remove so that it's concise and good, and then I'll do a little bit more on this video with the building of a stand for the light, and that'll wrap it up. Thanks. All right, well, I went ahead and I took a look at the video that I shot at the first part of this and learned quite a bit from it. I did some editing and looked at what I was getting to start with this. I said this is the very first video I've done. I'm now using the new light. I built a stand for it, and that seemed to work pretty well. I did notice that I could see a little square eye in my eyes, a white square in there, just like you see rings when you see the ring lights. So I've got this set off to the side, and I'll see if that works any better. But I got a nice stand set up for the light. It's easy, it folds up, and I can move it around to wherever I'm going to film. That's pretty much a wrap up for this video. Again, I apologize to people that have sat through the whole thing because it will get better. This is my way of sort of learning, is to try to just film a video. This wasn't a terribly interesting project, but it was one that I needed to be able to do for the video. I'll finish up with just a little picture or two of the stand, and thanks for watching, and I hope to improve these as time goes on. Thanks. Here's the stand, and it has a little adjustment for the angle, and then the leg is just a piece of rope, and it just folds up like an easel, and then can pop out, and the light slides down into little grooves that I cut in the wood to hold it in there. Pretty simple, but it should work well.